Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Bears All. Let's watch.
For me to drink alcohol. Give me promise. Why you all the time push me to drink?
No, you're putting blame on me.
All right, interesting. Now, we know that they broke up at this point. It's interesting to watch these scenes that were still, I think she just arrived. Anyway. So they're talking about how they're in a fight, and she's outside of the car, claiming to him that she is being forced by him to drink alcohol, and he's pressuring her to drink alcohol. Now, what I'm guessing what's happening is he likes to drink alcohol, and not like Jovi level, but his level, Mike's level, and I'm guessing that he doesn't like to drink alone and he wants to have a drink with his partner. One of the reasons why couples or friends will drink together is it can make one uninhibited and more lovey, more, chaotic. And when you're drinking by yourself and the other person is sober, it can feel weird to both people sometimes. So I can imagine for Mike, trying to convince her and maybe being too forceful about it. It's one thing to say like, it'd just be really fun if you drank. I understand if you don't want to drink, which is totally up to you, but it'd just be really great to have a couple drinks together and kind of laugh and just enter that kind of slightly tipsy space together as a couple. I would like that to happen. There's nothing wrong with communicating that, but it sounds like, at least from Natalie's perspective, he was being really pressuring and trying to force her.
With Mike through town, Mike offers me to drink beer with him. I say no. And he gets to a long conversation. Why? I don't want to drink a beer.
So he suggested that they have a drink together. She says no. He says, why? Now, from his perspective, we could imagine him being like, look, we don't have any fun anymore. And it'd be great if you could just kind of relax. Maybe if you had a drink, you could relax a little bit. Now, there's a lot of problems with forcing someone or pressuring someone to drink. If someone doesn't want to drink, they don't want to drink, and you should just let it go. I will say that for people who have addictions, they sometimes can be threatened unknowingly when other people refuse to partake. This has happened in my clinical life and in my personal life, where if, smoking marijuana, for example, and someone smokes every day, and so they come to you and they're just like, let's smoke some pot together or whatever, and you're like, I don't like pot, or I don't want to do it today, or whatever. If the individual asking to smoke pot is saying, if they have a lot of insecurity and shame about their use, the fact that you're making a decision not to use can make them question their own use and can make them extremely at odds with themselves. There's a voice that's saying, you probably should cut back on your marijuana use as well. And there's another part of them that's saying, but I can't function without marijuana, and I can't have you questioning it because this is my one thing that gives me stability or fun or numbing out from the traumas that I have, or whatever it is. And so this battle will happen, and through projective identification, they will put that on the outside, and they'll be fighting with you when in reality they're fighting with their own shame. You're just making a choice not to use, but they interpret it as you're shaming them for their use, which isn't necessarily true. Now, in this relationship, we can imagine it being true, that both being true, that Mike is trying to, fight with her because he's really kind of fighting with himself. Who knows? We could also imagine that she is saying, no, I don't want to drink, and I do think there's something wrong with you because you drink a couple beers at night. We can imagine both being true.
Crazy. And we have fight.
I will say that it's notable that she has gotten out of the truck and is now walking, I think, through slightly suburban Squim, and he is trying to get her to get into the car, which, I don't know what to think. Is this justified? Was he being extremely pressuring such that getting out of the car would make total sense? Is she overreacting and trying to punish him? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
Why do I have to scream and shout to not to drink alcohol? Why do I have to do it? You always insist for me to drink. I don't want to drink. No, you do.
I mean, the things she wants to say and argue about on what's going on right now are just stupid to me because, you know, she's talking about drinking like I forced her to drink. And I did not force her to drink.
Okay, so according to him, he did not force her to drink. Now, given what we've seen regarding his behavior before and after this moment, he isn't necessarily always aware of how he's coming across. So I have a hard time believing that he was extremely forceful about it, but I could also see how he would not be aware of the emotional messages that he is trying to convey. But I don't know, maybe we'll never find out.
Like, we used to drink and have fun, and now you come to America and you don't ever want to drink again? Like, I'm just curious, like, why?
There it is. Okay, so, which I get, but I think that's the germ of this conflict. He's saying, before you used to drink and we used to have fun, and you come to the States and you no longer drink anymore. You know, how come? And you hear that in that judgmental tone in his voice. Instead of like, you used to drink and now you don't, it kind of bums me out. Or you used to drink and now you don't, and I don't know, is there a reason why you don't drink? You know, it's up to you. You know, that's not his vibe. He is saying, it's almost like a paranoia, like a suspicion, like there's a threat there. And there could be. I mean, we could imagine Natalie using this point as a way of trying to take a jab at him. I mean, they had such a volatile relationship. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. But at the very least, he's saying, look, you used to drink, we used to have fun, and now you don't drink. How weird is that? You know, it's like, why do you have to approach it with that attitude of, there's something wrong with you, clearly, Natalie, because you're not drinking, and you're using this against me. You know, she just doesn't want to drink. What's the big deal?
You said, why don't you drink alcohol?
Why don't you drink alcohol?
Why? Why do I have to? I don't want. A million times you asked me to drink alcohol. You lying.
Yeah, okay, so according to her, 1,000,000 times you've asked me to drink alcohol, and she's saying, it's interesting, you know, to hear their perspective. She's saying, you asked me, why don't I drink alcohol? And he's like, no, I didn't, or that's not how I said it. I just said, how come you don't drink alcohol? So from his perspective, he's being curious. From her perspective, she's being controlling, which, you know, both could be true. We could see how there'd be a miscommunication around that. I'm just wondering if it justifies like getting out of the car and wandering down the city. I mean, he can't drive off. I mean, he's not going to leave her in, you know, a slightly suburban squim by herself without any vehicle. So I don't understand why she doesn't get in the car. It kind of also looks like she left her microphone on and he turned his off, because we can't hear his voice as well. So we could imagine that he turns off his microphone thing because he doesn't want this to be on the show. I don't know.
In Ukraine, because of Mike, I got drunk. I felt very bad. My mom got upset. It was huge drama. And I said, no more than want. And he knows it. And he still does all like pushes, you know. And this pisses me off because it's not fair, I think. No.
Okay. So if he is being pushy and it's unfair, that would be unfair if he's being pushy, and just say, look, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. You know, that's a more differentiated place of, look, I get the idea that you really want me to drink, and I'm just not going to, and that's kind of all I want to talk about it. Now, it's okay for him to say, look, I just want to know why. Because I think for him, I'm just going to take a guess that he really wants to I could totally see a scenario where I think they both really wanted to connect, and we're having a hard time. And I think for her, I'm trying to say, from her place, I think she wanted to connect, and I think she was worried about what kind of a person he was, or if he was going to become abusive. You know, people would say that in her part of the world, when men drink, they often will become abusive. So there's a possibility that our past relationships involved some level of abuse, and she was extremely worried about that. And whenever there was any minor sign of abuse coming her way, she would react against it and try to control it and put him down. I remember all that, like, you're a drunkard and you don't dress, you're stupid, you have low IQ, you know, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I think maybe that's where she was coming from, and that's what she was getting tripped up on. For him, it was very clear to me that he wanted to connect, but was terrified of vulnerability. And drinking can help people who have worries about vulnerability, because when they drink, they relax a little bit and it allows them to be authentic and real with people and allow feelings to come out in a way that is very satisfying to them. Of course, if you drink too much, then that can be a problem. If you drink chronically, that can be a problem, obviously. Even just drinking one time can be a problem, potentially. But anyway, so I think for him, he's wanting to connect. And because right as soon as she came to the States, they started to fight, because they'd been fighting back in Ukraine, right? And it carried over. And so for him, I could totally imagine him thinking, we're not connecting. Maybe if we got a little tipsy together, we could relax and be fun. And it would be like before, when she used to drink before. I could absolutely imagine that happening. And I can absolutely imagine without, it'd be one thing if he told Natalie, look, I love you, I want to be with you. I just feel like there's this tension between us, and I just feel like if we had a couple beers together, maybe we could relax like the old times and I'd be able to connect. If he said something like that, I'm guessing she would have received it a lot differently, but that's not really his style, because I think he's terrified of that vulnerability, because he's worried he's going to get rejected if he is vulnerable. And so instead of saying the truth, he will say, how come you don't drink? I don't understand. And if that's all you say, then of course the other person is going to interpret it as, you just want me to drink? Like, you're just going to pressure me, like peer pressure, like we're 13 and you're the bully and you're trying to get me to drink alcohol. That doesn't feel good. It feels discounting to me. It feels controlling. It feels, I don't want to drink. Stop it. Knock it off. And then he probably doubles down. Well, he's like, I don't understand. You used to drink. How come you don't understand anymore? Instead of talking from his feelings.
You understand? I don't want to be an alcoholic only because you want me to drink. It's not okay. No, you're lying. Okay, whatever, then I not sit in the car.
And then she's like, you're lying. Okay, I guess there could be an element of that. I'm dragged back into the past where I had such hopes for this couple in the beginning, and to see them not understand each other when I think it's so clear they're both desperately trying to connect and just completely misunderstanding each other. And it's just like, go to therapy.
When Natalie gets really frustrated and angry, yeah, it's a battle. Like, I gotta get her calm down. I gotta she'll just go off the deep end sometimes, and it's just like, holy cows, girl,
Until
stop.
you admit, I will sit here.
I just want to know why all of a sudden you didn't want to drink beer anymore.
Right. It's just more of this misunderstanding. So for her, she's like, until you admit that you pressure me to drink all the time, I'm not going with you. Until you stop lying, until you stop abusing me with your lies. Okay, that's one way of putting it. And then from his standpoint, I just don't understand why you don't drink anymore. It's like, it's so frustrating to watch, because I'm pretty sure I know where they're both coming from, but they just dig in on this one idea instead of changing tracks. It's something that a lot of people do, where we get into this kind of rut in our conversations, sometimes after 25 years with someone, and you just, instead of saying, okay, clearly this isn't working, maybe I should come at this from a different angle, even within myself. Whereas some people, they just keep repeating themselves over and over again. And it's like, if it didn't work the 15 times previous, and the result is she's now wandering the streets of Squim because she thinks you're a liar, how about you think, okay, clearly if I keep asking this question, it's not being received well. So I don't understand why, but maybe if I have a different, and give a little bit more context to it, or maybe think about what's going on inside of me. It's like none of that. It's just like, just keep asking the question, Mike. That'll work.
That's
All of a
asking.
sudden?
Yeah.
Okay, let's call my friends, my mom. Let's
don't wanna
ask
call them.
them.
I'm asking
No,
you.
it's bullshit,
I'm
Michael.
asking you.
People will talk about me.
We have previous issues, and now we have new issues. It's just so hard. I never expected this to be really this hard.
And of course, what people will say, including me, it's like, that Mike, just find someone that's more like you. I mean, someone that eats steak and has a beer and likes the woods and, you know, like your haircut person, like just, there's other people out there, you know, that aren't going to be such a, you know, contradiction to your lifestyle. Now, I suspect that there would still be the misunderstandings and the pain, but I don't know. I just imagine it being far less for both of them if they both found someone that was more compatible. Natalie is going to be on A Single Life coming up. And so I'm going to start watching that show as well. We're going to see Natalie date, and that'll be interesting to see because there's a good possibility that if she finds someone that is more similar to her, that they might be totally fine. Or we could see a repetitive defensive structure from Natalie that interferes with relationships regardless of who she's with. I guess we'll find out.
Okay, we're done.
Go.
It feels like it's not fair for people at all, this 90 days thing. Why 90 days? Who invented this 90 days? Why not half year?
Absolutely agree. I mean, the 90 days thing is to give you time. The government gives you time to get married because you have to attest to the fact that you definitely want to marry each other. It's 90 days to get the wedding, you know, situation in order. Presumably you've planned the wedding for longer than 90 days, and it just takes 90 days to kind of situate everything so you can actually get married. I know some of you will comment below and say, when I went through the 90 days, we were engaged well before the 90 days, and we just needed the 90 days to like do the rehearsal dinner and choose outfits or something. That's the 90 days, you know? So yeah, the 90 days is not enough time generally, particularly for people on the show, to decide whether or not they want to spend the rest of their life with someone. Absolutely.
Me and Mike having a lot of troubles now, and it's hard to fix because you fall for particular match, and he was just a romantic guy, and when I came here, I realized that it's totally different, and it upsets me because I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, totally. I don't know how to fix it. In the beginning, he was such a romantic guy. He would say the same, and he has. In the beginning, she was so fun, and we had such a great time together. Everything was fun, and I remember that in the beginning of the first season we saw them on. It just seemed like, oh, because I'd been seeing so many couples where I'm like, does this couple even love each? Do they even like each other? There are couples on the show where it doesn't look like they like each other, which is upsetting to watch, you know. And if you don't like each other, you don't have that, you know, thing to fall back on to say like, well, you know, I love that guy, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, or I'll just forgive him even though he's not apologizing. You know, that's what love does. You know, when you're family and you're attached, you do what you got to do to make things work, and that's a secret ingredient in relationship satisfaction and longevity. And without that, we see a lot of things we see on the show. Whereas with them, it seemed like they had that. So because of the walls, and I talked about it a lot when we would watch these sorts of scenes, I think what happened in the beginning, they didn't have those walls yet. It was still new and temporary. And sometimes when we're in a very new relationship, we're not as invested. And if the relationship falls apart, particularly maybe if it's long distance, we're like, well, you know, who cares? Because I'm not emotionally invested. I don't need this relationship to work out, and I'm okay. So I'm just going to live in the moment. And when they live in the moment, then it's like, oh, this is so great. Both people are doing it. I think at a certain point, they, interestingly, as they started to become more dependent on each other, you know, engagement, this sort of thing, their conflict started to go up as a result, I think, of their worries about being rejected. You know, the more attached, the more outwardly, you know, you sort of announce to the world, the two of us are now a thing, the more humiliation you could incur if things don't work out, and the more pain you could feel is if this person actually leaves you. So, and I think as that anxiety built in both of them, they would trigger each other, walls go up, trigger each other, walls go up, trigger each other. And this is just another example of that.
This 90 days, it's hard. It's not fair because you're like in a fucking stress.
Totally. How about just say, let's date? Let's not. Now, of course, what ended up happening, I think after this point, was the pandemic began and they waited, Mike waited until the very last minute to tell her he didn't want to marry her. And so she was faced with that very difficult legal problem during a pandemic at the possibility of, before pre-vaccine, getting hurt, traveling, this kind of thing. And then they got married because I think a good portion of it because of desperation for her safety rather than for the two of them. So, what Mike should have done is weeks prior said, look, I don't think this is going to work out. We need to give you a month to kind of figure out how to get back home and during a pandemic, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, so she's feeling the pain of just like, there's so much pressure. I don't know if I want to be with him. Makes total sense. And, it's interesting to think about if the pandemic wasn't around and the 90-day thing wasn't in place, if they just would have dated a little bit longer and been like, yeah, you know what, I guess things haven't been working out. Let's just call it quits. Instead of amping everything up with marriage and the pandemic, of course.
Unfortunately.
Well, if he knows that your body can't handle the alcohol, why do you think he kept pressuring you to drink?
Because Michael wants me to socialize. He tells me that it's okay, everybody drinks, and if I don't drink, people wouldn't be my friends.
Interesting. So according to her, she's saying he wanted me to drink because he wanted me to socialize, he wants me to make friends, and if I drink, then I'll make friends. I wonder if during this time, he's working a lot and commuting a lot, like Squim to Seattle. I think they would say it's like a 3-hour drive from his house. So it's 3 hours there, 3 hours back, or maybe an hour and a half there, hour and a half back. Anyway, there's a lot of traffic actually as well, unless he takes the ferry. There can be a lot of traffic even at the ferry because that can get backed up. Anyway, point is that he's gone a lot and he's also in charge. He's, according to her, some kind of foreman or boss or something. And she's alone a lot, and he probably was like, well, if you made friends, you could go out with friends. And she's like, well, I could totally imagine her saying, well, all everyone does is drink. Or I did go out with this group, but they drank. And he's probably like, well, if you had a couple drinks, maybe it would help out. And she's like, no. So I could imagine that situation. It sounds like which is very typical for what we've seen from Mike, instead of saying something like, I love you, I want you to have friends, it might help if you drink, but if not, if that's your choice, then maybe we'll try to find other people who don't drink, or you can do things during the day with other people. Being a little bit more flexible instead of just focusing and repeating and saying, how come you don't drink? You probably just should drink. Like, you just imagine him get real set in his solution instead of going, well, okay. And then her obviously getting triggered by that. It sounds like that's what happened.
Yeah, we don't like that. When our guy's relationship with somebody is a little bit too close.
No. I would like him to slow down, to talk to me, and first what I want to hear from him that, Natalie, I understand, I'm on your side, I love you, we will fix it together.
Right, good. Natalie is interesting because there are times when she can absolutely seemingly have a lot of differentiation. And in this moment, I don't know if I showed the clip, but they're talking about Sarah back when Mike was talking about how he went, he has a friend, Sarah, who was getting married the next day. He went to her house for some kind of, maybe a bachelorette party or something, and he stayed the night at her house, which given the amount of drinking that he does and probably what his friends do, maybe it was just a matter of just like, look, I'm too drunk to drive, I'm just going to stay here. And Natalie got very upset about that. And Natalie is saying, yeah, he's really close to this friend, and you can kind of hear it in her voice that threatens her, which is fine. What do you do with that jealousy? That's the key. And then she says, what he doesn't say, all I would want him to say is, look, I love you. I'm with you. I understand how you feel, and we'll get through this together. It makes total sense that she would want that. And we could see Mike not doing that. We could see Mike saying, I understand what the problem is. How come you're reacting this way? It's fine. You're overreacting. Something wrong with you. Instead of slowing down and saying, okay, what am I feeling right now? Well, I'm scared that I'm going to lose Natalie because she is accusing me of cheating, essentially, when I didn't cheat. So what do I need to say here? Well, I can say, well, first off, when you say this, it freaks me out because it makes me think like you're going to leave me when I didn't do anything wrong. 2, I can see how you would have this worry. I'm going to tell you, nothing happened. But I hear, I slept at another woman's house, and I could see how that would trigger you, anyone. So, but Mike doesn't say that, right? He just repeats of, there's something wrong with you, you're crazy time. Now, Natalie doesn't help by the way she communicates to him, because she does come at him extremely heavy sometimes. So they're just both contributing to those problems. But it's great, Mike, during the interviews and the one-on-ones, we don't hear a differentiated voice like we do from Natalie. She is able to say, essentially what she's saying is, I'm overly jealous. She's not saying this directly, but you kind of hear it in her tone. I get jealous sometimes, and that's on me. And the way that he communicated to me, it just made it so much worse. And if he just would have said X, Y, and Z, maybe I would have calmed down. So, it's a much differentiated, much more nuanced understanding of communication. We both contributed to it. He doesn't exhibit that. I think for him to even go down that road in his mind is extremely threatening to him. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.